Hi guys, I have a Copic Colouring video for you today, and I am colouring Scooty Witch by Make It Crafty. And Make It Crafty's colouring challenge this month is cast shadows. So that is what all this video is about. And if I had thought a little bit further when I started colouring this image, I actually would have used a whole bunch of the wonderful background images that Make It Crafty has to kind of create my background. But I didn't, so I'm kind of winging it when it comes to the background, and it didn't turn out the way I wanted, but that is how it is sometimes. I actually did a retake on it where I continued to color it, but the paper can only take so many layers of color, so yeah, it's not 100%, but it's okay. Now to the coloring at hand. This is the Scooty Witch. I have chosen to color her in like traditional witch colors, which are green, purple and black. I'm using the neutral grays with her to kind of color both the black and the grey on the steering wheel. And I'm also using some greyish reddish browns for the broom, so that we have the same kind of saturation and hue in the colors. The amount of kind of black versus white, sort of, something like that. The kind of coloring of the witch is kind of straightforward. I first go in with my lightest or next to lightest color to kind of map out where I want my shadows to be. And both with the witch's skin and the witch's dress, I have actually then gone in with a dark color, and then I've shaded all of it, and then I'm going back with an even darker color because I don't get the depth that I want to, the contrast between the lights and the darks. And one of the reasons for that is when you do kind of a swatch, you might just put the colors beside each other, which I actually did for this, and then you have a pretty dark color. But if you start blending on top of that dark color, you will push some of the pigment down into the paper and the color will be lighter. And also the colors, a whole bunch of the Copic colors actually are lighter after they dry, so it takes a little while before they have dried, and when they dried they're much lighter than when you put it down on paper. So this dark color, for example, feels very, very dark, but when I have blended it out with the other colors I was using, it's not as dark anymore. It's not as big of a contrast. And also when I do go from dark to light, just for that reason, to kind of smoothen my colors out. Yeah, I really like these images by Make It Crafty. They have a whole series of these cool characters because they have a lot of the line works done, so it's easy to kind of see where your shadow is going to be and how you want it. And if you look now, you see that I have created some cast shadows on the witch with the darker of the purple. It's the shadows that comes from the steering wheel, both from those tentacly things that coming out from the handles, but also from that brake handle. And I actually really liked how these turned out. And when cast shadows come as close as they do, these are very, very close. It's not a long part between the steering wheel and the witch, then the cast shadows will be very dark and very crisp, so that you can really see how the object looks. While, for example, the cast shadows that will come under the witch should be a lot lighter and not as crisp, more kind of dusky. That's not the word I'm after, but more soft. The edges should be a little bit more soft, because the further away if the shadow is from the object that's casting the shadow, the more loose the shadow is, sort of. I'm not explaining this very well, but yeah, a big part of this video is actually coloring the witch, because it's a lot of details. The witch has a lot of details, and one of the things I've been thinking of when I have colored her is to try to keep a very small color scheme, because that will kind of hold the image together. Personally, I have problems using too many colors, because then my images have a tendency to start coming apart or be too busy. And with these images that has so many details, it's actually pretty nice to keep to a strict coloring scheme. So I'm using the same purples for the dress, just more of the on the darker side for those swirly thingies on the handles. They probably have a name, but I have no clue what they would be called. And I'm using just the darker colors on them. And then when I'm doing the broom, instead of using one of the brighter kind of browns, I'm using the E70s, which are a little bit dusky reddish browns that very much go together with the idea of the image, but also with the other colors, so that it doesn't stand out. If I had used, for example, the E20s, it would be, the broom would stand out so much more than the witch. So that is also a tip. Now we are coming to the background. I'm starting by kind of adding some lines with my BG70, and I won't be using the BG70s for the rest of the image because it's too light. I want to do kind of a dark evening / night scene, and then I want it to be much darker, and I will go a lot darker than I'm doing here. So I'm using the BG's colors in the BG series all the way up to BG 78, and a little further on I'm also going to use the N6. That is a tip when you're doing your shadows. You can actually add the grays that you already have been using, or add grays that matches your color to do shadowing, both if you don't have enough pens, or if the darkest shade in that color series that you're working with isn't dark enough. It's very good. I do recommend, if you buy color or starting out as a Copic collector, because that is in the end what I have become, a Copic collector, I do recommend getting some grays. There are a bunch of different grays. You have the cold grays, the warm grays, the toner grays, and the natural grays. And do recommend getting the cold and the warm grays, because those they have quite a distance in between each other, and you can actually mix them together to get the toners and the neutral grays. I do, however, use mostly the toner or the neutral grays, but that is because a lot of the papers that I'm using, because I very often combined my Copic coloring with papers for my cards, and most of the papers do have more toner and neutral grays. But I would recommend the cold grays and the warm grays, because then you can use the grays to shadow with, even though you get a little bit of a dirtier color of the color, but you can really use it. So if you are really short on cash, I would recommend getting either the cool grays or the warm grays, and then two colors of each of the pens that you want your color scheme to be, and then you can use the grays to use for the darkest color. But yeah, as you see, I have now filled in with a lot of color. I'm mostly using the brush side. I did use the chisel side to begin with to kind of spread the color, but I mostly use the brush side because I feel I get a better coverage. And here is where I start with my kind of shadow, and I'm not 100% okay with my cast shadow here because I couldn't really decide on how I wanted it to look. I couldn't picture it in my mind because I didn't really figure out from where the sun was coming. Because if I would, or the moon in this case, because I'm thinking it's about night, but if you look at the image from where the light is coming and hitting the image, it's not 100% complete together with the cast shadow. The cast shadow should have been, I think, a little bit further back and a little bit higher up on the page. And here I'm cutting it down because this is where I felt, now I'm done. And then I've been looking at it for several days and figured out, no, I am not done. So I put it down again and started my camera again, and I started. And here's, I'm using the N6 to start shadowing to get a crisper kind of feeling at the bottom. And then I'm going in with the BG78 to kind of give those trees some more depth. And then I'm going in with the BG75 in between those trees to kind of add more tips, but they're a little bit lighter, so it looks like they're further away, so that it looks like a fuller forest and not just trees. This is where I decided I wanted to make a moon, and then I realized when I started making that moon that I already have a light source, and that is in front of the witch, so I can't have the moon in the sky behind her because then she would look completely different. And again, I'm trying to make something to kind of frame her because it feels like the paper is too much paper, it's too much area. I want to have a better frame, and this is where I go on and off and on and off and on and off and trying to figure things out. First I thought the shadow might need more details, which it really didn't. So I'm starting to add more details. I'm actually adding the hat in the behind it, and I shouldn't really have done anything of this because the shadow, the light is coming much higher up, so she wouldn't have that kind of shadow. And I'm using my B75 to kind of cover this up. And here is the problem. First of all, I should have kind of planned out my background much better. But then also you can only layer so many layers. Here I'm trying to kind of lighten up the shadow, and it doesn't work because I have basically filled the paper with color. All the color I'm adding now is actually kind of resting on top of the paper, and you can see that if you look closer that it's starting to kind of pool. The darker color is pooling, and this is because I have saturated the paper so thickly with the color that it's just not working. So I'm trying to figure out a way to save this. So I'm starting to build up some depths, some kind of leaves, and in the end I'm actually gonna go in with a Copic liner and add that, add those kind of grass strands or what it's called with that Copic liner. But yeah, my cast shadow on the bottom of the screen is not the best depiction of a cast shadow. It should be, as I said, higher up on the paper and much longer back on the paper. But the cast shadows from the steering wheel is actually quite good, so look at those instead. And come and join us over at Make It Crafty and our cast shadow challenge. I want to thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, just comment down below. If you want to see more videos like this, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you later.